Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Pierce. I'm going to be your guide through Experience the Very First Christmas. This was quite a project, and I want to tell you about it as we go along. This time I'm going to tell you about how it started and then the first 4 chapters. We're going to meet Mary, Joseph, and their families. What an event this has been. Here's how it all began. My wife and I were at a Christmas pageant. It was a wonderful thing with flying angels and donkeys, even camels going up and down the aisles. And my grandchildren were in it, so it was especially special. And when we got out, I said, that was just wonderful, but I really don't think that's what happened. But the crazy thing is, I didn't know what happened. I really didn't know what the real historical event was. Isn't it interesting that the person that we hold as our Lord and Savior, we have surrounded with myths about how he was born and his first years and that whole process that happened for the first 30 years. I wasn't ready to tackle all of that yet, but I wanted to know about the birth. What happened and who were these people? And so here's what I did. I went home, went to my office, and started the research project that lasted several years. First of all, I was very surprised because there were hundreds and hundreds of documents available to me. These are documents that really haven't been available until the last 25, 30, 40 years. Through our archaeological processes, we have found more material about this specific period and this specific place where Jesus was born. In fact, we have a lot of information that absolutely proves he was there, he was born, and he existed and lived in this area. Isn't that great? But let's find out what really happened. When I got home, I started the project. And I ended up with all of the events, and I put them on a board across the wall of our room. And every time I would find one, I'd put it up there. Well, I ended up with hundreds and hundreds of events that happened. I also wanted to know which ones had the most authenticity. And so what I did is it needed to be in 3 different historical documents that we considered valid. Now, the most valid historical documents that I believed and I used were those from the Roman historians that were in the different places that they had the job of documenting what was happening. So I took those first. And then second were the priests' church records of the time and shortly thereafter. There were really hundreds and hundreds of documents that I had to choose from that covered this first period of time, the very 0 year and before. And so I would elevate those up as being the most valid. Well, it came down to now, when was Jesus really born? Well, that's open for debate, and it turns out that our Gregorian calendar, which really isn't more than 600 or 700 years old, missed. It missed by about 6 or 7 years. And so what I did is I took the timeline of when Jesus was born and when the events happened from what I felt was the most agreed upon time frame. We'll never know exactly when Jesus was born, but there's a lot of evidence, and people are narrowing it down to kind of a specific period or a specific year. So all of these events that I ended up with on my wall of my room, now what am I going to do with this? And my wife came up with a great idea. Let's go back and let's experience it. And let's take people with us so that you can experience it firsthand. You can get to know who Joseph was, who Mary was, who their parents were, who their friends were, how they lived, what they ate, where they went to bed, and the whole process. It was an exciting and a great adventure. And this is what we're going to take you on. What I did is we put together a time cruise. Now, this is just like getting on a cruise boat and going to the Bahamas or someplace else. This is a time cruise that we're going to take you back in. Time to Jesus' birth. In fact, we're going to take you back 1 year prior to Jesus' birth, and we're going to stay there a little over a year after Jesus' birth. So it's about 2.5 year period that we can go and experience this event and meet these people, and we'll go with them on their journeys. So going on to chapter 1. All right, how it started, chapter 1. Welcome to Nazareth. Well, the first thing that happens is we dress up like we think we should be for the first century, and our time cruise drops us in on the main floor of the temple in Nazareth. And I'll be darned if the priest doesn't come in and say, "Who are you? Where are you from?" Well, obviously our dress wasn't exactly right. Okay. We explained we're visitors from a foreign land, and he agreed. Yes, you must be from a foreign area the way you all look. So we asked if we could find Joseph somewhere around. We had heard about him, and we were so anxious to meet him. We'd come this long distance just to meet him. And as luck would have it, and author privilege has it, he was there at the temple. So Joseph comes in, we meet him, and he takes us on a tour then of Nazareth, which is a very interesting place. And we start to learn who the people are, how they live, how they cook, where they eat, and the entire process of where Nazareth was and how it was constructed. And we could look over the different areas around Nazareth. See, Nazareth is on the north side of the Jezreel Valley. Now, on page 14, and I have behind me here that picture of the temple in Nazareth where we went. Now, this is in Nazareth Village in Nazareth, Israel. It's a recreation of the Nazareth town. And this temple that you see is a recreation of the temple in Nazareth. Now, Joseph goes ahead and takes us on up just above Nazareth. Now, Nazareth is on a hill, and we go on up the hill, and we look over at the Jezreel Valley. And here's a picture of the Jezreel Valley, and you can find that on page 19. This is the valley of the Old Testament. Every time you hear in the Old Testament of a war or troops coming through, this is it. This is where Gideon and Samson and all those people had all of their events happen here in the Jezreel Valley. It goes all the way from the Jordan River clear to the Mediterranean Sea, and it's bounded on the north by the hills of Nazareth, and it's bounded on the south by the Carmel Mountains. Well, and interesting, the Carmel Mountains has a special pass that goes through it. It's really about the only way through it, other than going down through the Jordan Valley, and it's Megiddo Pass. Megiddo Pass is where all of the battles happened that happened in the Old Testament. In fact, it was the place where the first mechanized war happened when the Pharaoh came up from Egypt and conquered this area. So this is such an area of fascination and history and events. So we're looking at the Jezreel Valley, and just across the valley there is the mountain there. All right, well, we go on over, Nazareth. Let's talk a little bit about where Nazareth is. Nazareth, obviously just to the north of the Jezreel Valley, and it's about 6 miles south of the Sea of Galilee. And so people would travel over to the Galilee and get fish and then have them salted and bring them back. That was their main staple for meat. Interesting, halfway there, for a little rest stop, is Cana. And they would rest there and then go on to the to the sea. And we know about the wedding at Cana, where Jesus went and turned water into wine. Well, one of the really important towns is just a few miles, 4 or 5 miles, to the northwest of Nazareth, Sepphoris. Sepphoris was a town that they had decided would be Rome in Israel. And they were constructing a new Rome. They wanted it to be better, brighter, greater. And so this was the place, if you were anybody and a Roman citizen, this is where you had your summer home. This is the place you came and you built your place. So it was a splendid area. Joseph's family were master builders. They were the ones that built the temples, the towns, the big houses. They were the construction company of the area. And Joseph and his brothers lived just to the west of Nazareth in a family home there. And we go there and meet Joseph's family. Now, Joseph had a little bit of a falling out with his brothers, and he had moved over to Megiddo with his family. But he was here quite often, helping out with the family business in the construction company. See, a carpenter was the contractor, the builders of that area. We think about carpenters being somebody who does a little woodwork here, makes a door there. No, these were your builders. This was the heavy equipment people of the time. And so we go over to Joseph's family, and that's in chapter 2. And we go over, one of the things that we're amazed at is how much you have to walk. I say in the book that we did a lot of exercise to get ready for it, but who can be ready for that much walking? And on sandals that really don't protect anything. And we went over to the family compound. It was quite a place. It was had a wall around it, a 2-story house, and lots of servants and slaves. We really weren't used to the idea that there would be a lot of slaves, but they were the manual labor of the time. It was every time the Romans went out and conquered a new area, they brought new slaves. And if you were someone of importance or doing work like this construction company, you were given this allotment of slaves. The only thing you couldn't do with the slave is you couldn't kill them. That was left as the only people who could do that would be the Roman government. So we went into the house, and I have behind me a kitchen from that time period. Well, this is from the Nazareth village again, and you can see that on page 25. Very interesting. You can see the pot over here, the big water pot. That was the main water supply and the cooking area. What an event this was. Well, we learned some things about what you can do and what you can wear, and you'll see in here a lot of that going on. One of the funny things. All right. We all live together. All right. It's mostly one big room. Now, the owner of the home would have a room that he and his family would live in or stay in. Occasionally, if they were very wealthy, they would have a room that only one person or a couple would be in. But typically, it would be a larger room, 25 by 15 or so, and that's where everybody stayed. That's where you ate. That's where you slept. That's where you changed clothes. That's where you cleaned up. It was the house, all in one room. And so when it came time to eat, everybody sat down, and there was some mats that were the eating mats, and you would roll out your mat, and the eating mats would come. They'd bring in all of the food, and we'd sit on the floor and eat for an hour or so. The evening meal started near the 12th hour. Now, the time is set up so that in a day it's divided into 12 equal parts. And so the first hour is right after sunrise. The 12th hour is right before sunset. And so when it says it gets to the 11th hour, that means day's almost done. All you have is one more hour to get everything completed. And you really can't complete anything, then that's the time you eat. And you sit down while you still have good light, and you start your meal. And somewhere in the middle of the meal, they bring in the lamps. And so you finish the meal another hour after sunset and by lamplight. It was an extraordinary event. Food is natural, good, and tasty. Lots of dates, that's what they used for their sweetener. And you should go and try some date nut bread. You can find them at your health store, and it's a wonderful thing to do along with some goat cheese. Exactly what they were eating at that time. And flat breads, unleavened type breads, like a naan bread that you can get. So it's a wonderful meal with more than enough to eat, eaten over a period of 1 to 3 hours. And so most of the time was spent in conversation as to what things were happening and how people were doing, and playing those kind of games with one another. Great event. Well, Joseph decided that he would take care of our clothes since we were so improperly dressed. And one thing we found is modesty has a whole different threshold in that family, since in one room we're doing everything. Now there are screens, so the extent of your privacy is a screen. And so they'll put it up and there you go. And modesty has no place in a situation like this, and we found that out. One of the things that we did find out is my wife was wearing her bra and panties. Ladies, you can't wear those sort of things. Obviously, the bra was something that was totally foreign and had to go, but women cannot wear pants of any kind. It's an offense against the family. It's an offense against God. It's the woman trying to elevate themselves to an equal with a man, and the woman is property. That's just not done. We went through a little process there while everybody had to come and inspect those. So you can imagine having to do that, ladies. So it was quite a learning experience. Oh yes, and then we had to go to the bathroom. You'll have to read that one for yourself. My wife goes first, and she comes back and says, "Honey, you just got to come see this." Yep, it was that interesting. And then we had our dinner, and then it became time for us to go to sleep. I didn't say go to bed, because go to sleep was you had a mat, which we were given, a reed mat, that you roll out on the floor, and hard floor, I might mention, no plush carpet and with padding. Okay, so here you are, flush, hard floor, little reed mat about that wide, and that's bed. Okay, well, I did not do well with that. I don't know about you, but sitting on the floor for extended periods of time without a pillow and trying to go to sleep on a hard surface is not my idea of what I want to do. And I didn't do it very well. I'll go through what we did to fix that a little later when we are able. But we did get through it, and pretty soon you just get so tired that you just go off to sleep, and you wake up with your bones sticking through your skin, I'm telling you. So it was a fun experience, really. And then we arise and start the new day. Chapter 3 is we're walking. I had to tell you how much walking there was. Well, first of all, we just walk over to Sepphoris. It's only 6 miles, 12 miles back and forth. It's just a matter of an hour there, an hour back. Go ahead. Walk 6 miles up and down hill in sandals. Joseph was much quicker than we were, and my wife was able to keep up with him, but I made it. Let's just go ahead and say that. And we went to Sepphoris, and what a place. Really mansions, by even today's standards, mansions with gardens and fountains and pillars. And no wonder we still do that. But talk about people who are obsessed with where they lived and their symbols of power. Things haven't really changed a lot there. And we visited the construction site, and they're moving large blocks of granite, of rocks, and shaping those rocks and getting them ready to go into walls and into houses. Fascinating event. And you'll love seeing it. Just use your mind's eye to go through and visualize what's really happening here. And so we walk over there and see them, and then we walk over to Mary's mother's house. Now, Mary's mother is Anna. Anna is a prominent person in this whole story. She's a typical Jewish mama, and Jewish moms run the family. It's so interesting that they're really not counted as people. Even in a census, they're not counted. You'll notice in the Bible, very few women, mostly men, because of the time. But they ran the house. They were the ones in charge. Hasn't changed very much, has it? Wonderful woman, very strong, very forceful, and very wealthy. She had inherited her wealth from her family, which was a surprise to me. I didn't know anything about Anna or Mary's family, but they were the ones. They had quite a lot of land. They were the main contributors to the Roman legions for horses and cows and meat. They raised cattle, sheep, and horses. Horses have a predominant place in this because of my wife and my backgrounds. So you'll see some of that as we go through. And it's so interesting to meet her and see the dynamics of who is this and what kind of a home do they live in. Now, here's an interesting thing that I realized and we had studied for, but if you're talking to the priest, they're talking Hebrew. Okay? If you're talking to an educated person or society, you're talking Greek. If you're talking to the Romans, you're speaking Latin. And if you're talking to the normal people every day, you're talking Armenian. Well, 4 languages. So this was just the mixing pot of the time, and Nazareth was right in the middle of it. Just below Nazareth in the Jezreel Valley, just below Nazareth was the trade route. This was where everybody went from the east, clear down to Egypt. And so this was a mixing pot of languages and cultures and experiences right here. And so it was interesting that we had to see this process going on. Now, 90+% of all the people were illiterate. Well, that was a little surprising, but there weren't any books. The only books there were scrolls, and they were kept in the temple or by the government. Now, if you were really, really wealthy, you could have 1, 2, 3 of these scrolls there in your home. Well, Anna was one of those, and so she was literate in all 4 languages and could do business in all 4 languages with the temples and with the Romans and with the society and with the common people there. The workers, us, the people who were the lower middle class, that was the rest of us. We were speaking Armenian. And so this was just an interesting thing to see the dynamics of what was happening there. Well, where's Mary in all of this? She wasn't there, so had to ask. Mary was dedicated to the temple in Jerusalem. See, Anna and Jehoiakim, husband, wanted a child, and they just couldn't have one. So they went to the priest, and he prayed and said, this is going to be a holy child, and the conception will be a miracle. Well, whatever. And because it's a miracle, when you have the child, you must dedicate that child to the temple. Now, we remember in the Old Testament, Samuel was dedicated to the temple, and Eli, the priest, was in charge of him. See, you just give up your parenting rights and responsibilities and everything to the temple. And the child goes there when they're between 3 and 4, and they stay there for their life. You are no longer their parent. They are now the child of God and are under the authority of the priests of the temple. That was what Mary was. So when she was 3 or 4, she went on down, they took her down to the temple in Jerusalem. And as the story goes, she was so in tune with it, she left her family and walked up the stairs to the temple on her own. She was ready, and now she was there. She was now going to be 14, and everybody was in uproar, because the priests had made the decision that she was going to be married and leave the temple. Everybody was confused because Mary was absolutely convinced she'd be there for her whole life and wanted to be there for her whole life. She wanted to remain a virgin and to be married to God and not to a man. And so this was a big question. Did she do something? Was there a problem? No, this was just the priest's decision that they were going to get her, choose her a husband, and she was going to marry this whoever they chose. See, normally the husband is chosen by the parents. Well, the parents in this case were the priests, and so they had made the decision, and they were going to choose the husband. And she was marrying age 14. Well, seems a little young, but girls got married between 13, 14, boys typically 18 to 20, because it was important for the boy to go establish himself in the family business so that he would have a means to support his new family. And it wasn't like they moved off to Boston or someplace. No, they stayed with the family. They would either stay in one of the rooms of the family home, or they would build a new room onto the family home, or they would build a new little house next to the family home. So that's how the villages began. We found out that most of the villages were families. Everybody in the village were aunts, uncles, cousins, who knows. In fact, they were so many different kinds of relationships that they didn't call each other uncle or aunt or cousin, or they just called them family, brother, sister. That's it. And so a lot of times the kids would talk about mother and mean somebody next door. And brothers meant Joe across the little village. But as far as they were concerned, everybody was family, because they were. Totally different idea than what we have today. Well, the next day, we go into chapter 4, and happy birthday to you, Mary. Well, Mary shows up, comes in, obviously a gifted young lady. She was totally fluent in all languages. She was a priestess, if you will, a beautiful person, completely articulate and assured of herself. Now, it's interesting. Anna had the biggest problem with Mary getting so-called kicked out of the temple. Mary was, if this is God's will, then let God's will be done to me. And we see this through the entire New Testament of Mary willingly taking on things that you and I would have a problem with just understanding, much less accepting. And so it was so interesting to meet Mary and have the birthday. Now, in this time, in the Jewish culture, they did not celebrate birthdays because it elevated the person to a status of being too important. It was important that you stay humble and that your birthday celebration would bring you up to a higher level than you ought to be. But in this case, it was more of a welcome home, Mary, and by golly, you are 14 years old and you're going to start a new life and a new family, and now you're here and let's see what happens. Now, they couldn't have the birthday on exactly Mary's birthday because she was born on Yom Kippur. Now, Yom Kippur is a very holy day. Don't do anything other than those traditional ceremonies for that day. And so it was the day after that we actually had more of a celebration of Mary's arrival and the start of her new life. And it was so interesting to see and hear and meet Mary, Anna, and the rest of the family there. Mary's dad, Jehoiakim, had died, and so Anna had remarried, and the new husband is a little bit in the background, really. He's works with and for the temple, dealing with the logistics, dealing with the temple process and properties. And you'll see that. Well, what an exciting adventure we're on, and you'll enjoy each moment. Take your time. It's easy reading and pretty short, really. Enjoy the experience. Next time, we'll go through the marriage, the betrothal of Mary and Joseph, and the selection of Joseph. Oh, you can't wait for that. It's going to be so interesting how that whole thing happened. So until next time, see you then.